But I think in general, I think it's so powerful when people can fully accept who they are. And I've just seen that over and over
Mm,
again over the course of my career, and people that I work with and that I maybe mentor and don't work with, that when they reach that point of fully accepting who they are, that's always when I see them take
mm,
off.
mm-hmm,
That's always when I see them do so much more than they thought that they
mm-hmm,
could. And that's why I
mm,
think it resonates so well with so many people
mm-hmm.
around the world. It's that acceptance of all of your flaws, all of your um, beauty, all of that combined
Mm-hmm.
is what makes you you. And having everyone else around who accepts you, that's when you can truly be at your best.
Welcome to this episode of Hyphen Nation. Today I'm joined by my guest, Julie Kim from Boston. Julie is the current president, CEO, and representative director of Takeda. She was elected by shareholders and appointed by the board of directors this last month. At the 150th annual general meeting in Osaka. She's the first female CEO of Takeda since they were founded 245 years ago. She's also the first Asian American and Korean American to lead a top-tier global pharmaceutical company. She's one of the few East Asian American CEOs that came up through the ranks and was appointed and elected, where most other CEOs are founders of their own companies. She's a graduate of Dartmouth and has her MBA from Northwestern Kellogg School. Thank you for being with us on the podcast today, Julie.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
So we met back in, I think it was January at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, and we did a little fireside chat. And again, as I said back then, it was like meeting Jeremy Lin of pharma. So very, very, very exciting to see you. When I interview C, most people think of them as superhuman. They're beyond them. They could never be that person. But I always want to help people relate and think that could be me, and see you as like, oh, I could be there someday. So that's why I love to kind of dig into the origin stories of the people I interview and the CEOs I interview, because it makes them see themselves as, hey, potentially that could be me. So let's go way back. Were you born in Korea or in Ohio?
I was born in Korea. I was born in Seoul, Korea, and then moved to Ohio when I was quite young.
Okay. And so what brought your parents here?
So they studied in medical school, wanted to be doctors. They met in medical school and they got married. My mom, who, I would say was quite progressive for her generation, wanted to keep practicing medicine. And as you can imagine at that time, huge cultural pressure to not work. And once she became pregnant with me, that pressure accelerated
Mm,
exponentially, and maybe intensified is a better word than accelerated. And so they moved to the US because they wanted to have their dreams and wishes come true. But then also because I was born a girl and not a boy, they thought, okay, well, it would be better for me as well to grow up in the US versus
mm,
in Korea.
yeah.
So that's why they moved.
And so your mom continued practicing here in the US. She didn't
Yes.
stop. Wow.
Yeah.
I know a lot of moms end up having to like, give up their careers, and so the father has to go. So your parents were pretty progressive to both to do that for you. That's amazing. So tell us about Northeast Ohio. What was it like growing up there? I'm assuming you were probably one of the few Asians in your classes growing
Yeah.
up.
So I would say it was a clash of cultures. That would be the way that I would describe my childhood. On the one hand, very loving family, close knit friends. So it's not that I had a horrible childhood, but it was a constant clash of cultures. Back then, this was way before K-pop, K-beauty, K-drama. Most people had never heard of Korea. Maybe if they watched the television show MASH,
Mm,
they knew what Korea, where it was and what it was, but it was in a very, very specific context. And so lots of teasing by other kids, the typical things about food and language, those cause culture clashes, but also from my parents as well, things like sleepovers, particularly as a girl. Sleepovers were huge, but that was so against the way that my parents were raised. I didn't get to go to a real sleepover until late in high school.
Mhm.
Previous to then, I would be allowed to go, but then my parents would pick me up at like 10 o'clock.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to stay the night. So lots of culture clashes. That's how I would describe my childhood.
And what activities were you involved in? Would you say that you were more inclined to kind of keep your head down and just do good in school, or were you more kind of out there blending in and trying to do all the things that, your other classmates are doing?
Well, you know, I would say it was a mix because personality wise, I'm an introvert.
Mhm.
So I'm not one who is always wanting to put myself out there.
So you weren't a cheerleader or anything like that?
But I was a cheerleader.
Oh. Okay, introvert. Okay, got it. I wasn't ready
So
to put myself
I
out there, but just jumping and flipping
but
and
I
stuff.
would yeah, but I would do these things to try to fit in.
Mhm, mhm.
So it wasn't because my personality was driving me to do it.
Mm, mm.
I desperately wanted to be able
Be like
to
her.
fit in.
Mhm,
So I would do these things that were popular, that the other girls wanted to do.
mhm,
I would try,
mhm.
um, because of that. But, needless to say, even despite and that was only in junior high, by the way.
Yeah,
Junior
yeah,
high cheerleaders, very different
yeah, very different, very different.
than than older cheerleaders. But it was simply to try to fit in.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of, as you can imagine, pressure to look like everyone
Mhm,
else did, to do what they did. And so I would always try to hide
mm,
my culture
mm.
and some of my personality in order to be able to fit in.
Yeah.
But then on the weekends, we had this very small group of five families, Korean families, that were really close knit. I was the oldest child in that family group. And there were a number of kids who were a year or two younger than me, and then some further younger kids. So I was kind of the mom of that group. So the weekends were very much spent with those families
Mhm.
and enjoying and being Korean to some
Yeah,
extent, with
yeah.
the food and the language, et cetera. So it was kind of like having two different lives
Lives. Yeah,
almost.
yeah. So you were the one that all the other kids resented because you were the Ivy League girl who ends up being the CEO of a large company they still get compared to. Like, "Oh, why can't you be more like her?" Although you were pre-med and then you didn't go into medicine, so that they might have been like, "Oh, see?" But you turned out okay. So weekends, like, it's like living two identities, during the week and then on weekends. But it sounds
Well,
like you.
it's two different identities with the different friend groups, right? Because
Yes,
there
yes.
are things that I would do with my school friends,
Mhm.
but that sometimes felt like a different person
Yeah. Yeah.
than the person that I was with the Korean families.
Yeah, you like many others have had to compartmentalize ourselves to
Yes,
to fit in. But,
yes.
I mean, you did have to fit in, and you were willing to do things that you weren't comfortable doing, but it got you out of your comfort zone, so I think oftentimes I think we forget how being a chameleon like that helps us later on in our careers as
Yeah,
well. But so move forward and you're going to Dartmouth. Is that the first
yeah.
time you felt like, I mean, Dartmouth doesn't have a ton of Asians either. When did you kind of find your identity, your Korean
I
American,
can't
Asian American identity?
I can't really say I found
Mm,
it necessarily at Dartmouth either. Because to your point, it's not a massive school.
yeah.
If I wanted to do that, I could have gone to, like, UCLA or something like that,
Yes.
where there would have
Yes.
been a massive
Yes.
population
Yeah.
of Asians. I did one of the reasons why I chose Dartmouth was because they had a very robust student exchange program.
Mm,
You could actually design your own student exchange. And
mm.
I knew that I had wanted to go to Korea for a student exchange program. And that was the only school that would allow me to do
Oh,
that.
wow.
And so that's why I ended up picking Dartmouth. And I did go to Yonsei for my junior year fall semester. And I would say that
Mm,
was the first time where I was
yeah.
like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
there's this whole other world.
Yeah.
But it was still funny
Yeah.
because at that time, there weren't a lot of foreigners in
Mhm.
Korea.
Mhm.
And on the one hand, while I felt like, "Oh, okay, so these are my people, so to
Hmm.
speak," they didn't necessarily see me that
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was, and I know many countries have their own words for this, but in Korea, it's a 재미교포, right? So it's an American, Korean American who really viewed more as American than
Yep.
Korean.
Yep.
And so it was odd also feeling like an outsider there
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
But it was where I could really kind of learn more about my Korean heritage and embrace that side of me a bit more.
Sounds like it was a much more academic experience than the summer Yonsei program that many friends have gone
Yes.
to. Very different. But it sounds like you were very, at an early age in high school, you were cognizant of the senior year when you chose to go to Dartmouth for that reason, that you were longing to see that, find that connection, because that you had to have foresight to actually pick Dartmouth for that reason. So you clearly
Yeah.
had something inside that made you long to go back to Korea and experience this.
Well, I did spend, I spent a couple of summers with my extended family in
Mm,
Korea during high school, which helped to
yeah.
build that desire. But it
Hmm.
also, I would say, unlocked a bit of, I'll call it wanderlust in
Hmm.
my personality, I suppose. And
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to see different parts of the world and
Yeah.
explore different parts of the world.
And that continued in the rest of your career, obviously. So,
Yes. Yes.
and so you were pre med going into Dartmouth, or at Dartmouth,
Yes.
and then that changed sophomore year, or when did that change?
Yeah, so I started pre-med and I actually got a student internship working at the Dartmouth Medical School
Hmm.
in one of the laboratories. And, previously in high school, I worked either in hospitals or in my parents' offices. So I was always around other physicians and hospital and, doing that type of
Hmm.
work. But at some point during that student internship, it just dawned on me that, I could do this, but my heart wasn't in it.
Mm,
And so, fortunately, my parents they didn't have their heart set on me becoming a physician. So they said, okay, do something else. But, it had to kind of fall into, I said, oh, I actually said, I want to be a double French and Japanese language major. And they said, "No.
they're
What are you
progressive, but
gonna"
not that
Well,
progressive.
exactly, exactly. "What sort of job are you going to get with that?"
Yes, yes, yes.
So so they said, "Okay, not to be a doctor, but not okay to be
Yeah,
a language
there was
major."
a line. There was a line.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a line. So I explored law. I
Of
did a
course.
summer internship, at one of the large law firms in New York City, and I was like, "Okay, that's not for me either."
Yeah,
I didn't want to be an engineer. So there go all of the typical career paths, right?
yeah.
Doctor, lawyer, engineer.
Engineer. Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, well, maybe banking, but I looked into that and it wasn't so interesting.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of stuck.
Hmm.
But an older friend who had already graduated gave me the advice of looking at consulting. He said, look, you really like problem solving. You know, consulting is basically just addressing big complex problems for different companies. So maybe check that out. And when I did, I was like, oh, I really like this. So that's why I pursued interviews with consulting firms
Got it.
my senior year.
Got it. And then, so you started your career in consulting then?
Yes,
And was it in healthcare consulting at all, or was it just
it was because
okay?
there was still this part of me that, like my parents, and as I said, having spent a lot of time in
Yeah.
hospitals and watching doctors, I did still want to be able to contribute in
Hmm.
that way.
Hmm.
So I ended up going to a boutique healthcare consulting firm
And was that in Boston? No, that
in
was
New York,
oh, in
in
New
New
York.
York
Okay,
City.
so your career started in New York. Got it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so let's go back home to the family. And can you tell us about kind of your mom and your relationship with your mom throughout this?
Yeah. So as you can guess from some of my earlier comments about culture clashes, it wasn't always a rosy
Mhm.
relationship. There were lots of arguments, particularly when I was a teenager, about things that I wanted to be able to do that most other American teenagers did,
Mhm.
but my parents wouldn't let me do because from their perspective, it just wasn't acceptable.
Mhm.
So I would say through high school, a very challenging relationship with my mother. Now, that being said, though, I always admired her from a career perspective. I just didn't always get along from a
Mhm.
mother daughter
Mhm.
perspective. And then when I started, being an independent adult and then, graduating and living on my own, that's really when I started understanding
Mhm.
the sacrifices that my mom had made, the way that she works, and just the way that she interacts with people and the dedication that she had to taking care of her patients. And it grew into a very, very deep admiration.
Mm.
But then unfortunately, my mom passed away. And so on the one hand, I feel like, gosh, I wish I would have recognized some of this earlier.
Mhm.
Um, but it required me to grow up and
Yeah.
mature a bit and enter the working world to really understand what it was like for her.
Yeah.
But that's fortunately ended in a very positive space versus where it was when I was a teenager.
And so your mom passed when you were in your early 20s? Was this when you were consulting?
Yes. Yeah.
And so can you share the story about, sitting in the church during her memorial service? I know it was a pivotal
Yeah.
moment in your career.
Yeah. So I need to give you a little bit of context so that the story resonates, I think, a bit more. So, my identity through school was always being the smart one. Like most Asians, you study hard, you want to get good grades. Yeah, your parents are like, a 98? Why not 100?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that was always there growing up. And so I always wanted to be the the one who had the best grades.
Mhm.
And so that translated into the working world of wanting to have the best ideas, and I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the people around me per se. And when you work in consulting, you typically work in teams
Mhm.
on a project,
Mhm.
and then the project ends, and then you move on to the next project. But you're always in different teams, and I always just focused on being the best at what I was doing, and not necessarily paying attention to those around me. And so now, fast forward to my mother's funeral, and the whole church was filled,
Mm.
and there were people standing in the back, and I didn't recognize most of them. I didn't know most of them. And I had asked my dad, who are all these people and why are they here?
Mm.
This is a family
Mhm.
affair. And he had said, look, these are all people that came to pay their respects to your mother because she touched their lives in some way. And, it was one of those moments where, I was thinking, well, if I got hit by a bus,
Mhm.
maybe the first two pews would be filled. One with family because they had to be there, right? And then a few other people might come.
Mm.
And that was one of those aha moments of, okay, maybe the way that I'm doing things isn't the best way. And while I didn't at that time know exactly what I had to do, I knew it had to be different from what I was
Mhm.
doing. And so
Mhm.
that began the long journey of self-awareness,
Mhm.
self-improvement.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny because I feel like so many of us grow up heads down, grinding, getting the grades, so we think that that's what's gonna make us stand out, and people
Yep.
admire us and respect us for that. My dad passed away when I was 25, same thing, full like, the church was full of people, and I was like, "Well, who how are there so many people here?" But it wasn't about the grind or the grades or the performance at work. Like, these were all friendships and relationships that they made through their life, and it wasn't about kind of performance based stuff. And I definitely
Exactly.
think so many of us are raised to stand out, and with like our meritocracy and earning it and all that stuff gets to our head, and we forget the most important part about this life is actually building those relationships along the way. And so yeah, a very similar experience, but same. It was like I think a lot of young people these days get caught up in that kind of that glory of I need to build a company and go IPO, and then I'll be important and then people will care. And it's like, not if they didn't like you along the way, or you didn't actually interact with them or have a conversation with them. Who cares, right?
Exactly. And that's why people say, it's a very simple construct, but it holds true through time.
Mm-hmm.
What you do isn't as important as how
Mm-hmm.
you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've progressed in my career, what you see is that there are lots of people who can deliver the what,
Mm-hmm.
but not so many people that can do it in a manner
Mm-hmm.
that brings everyone else along, or that builds strong followership. And
Yeah.
that how piece
Yeah.
is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and it's something I talk about a lot. I think a lot of Asian Americans, they have the aptitude, but kind of the things around that, like they can get any project done and execute really well, but the things around that they don't think is important, or they don't prioritize, and that's the stuff that eventually actually matters when you want to be noticed.
Absolutely. Because when you become leader of a larger organization, it's not about what you can do, it's about what you can motivate an organization to. And so at some point along the way, you have to learn it's not about executing, it's about building those relationships, understanding the motivation so that people will run through walls
Mm-hmm.
for you, with
Mm-hmm.
you, because there's always going to be another challenge that you have to overcome. And if you are just focused on execution, people won't do that.
Yeah.
People won't come along with you.
Yeah. It's like we care so much about, because we were so focused on getting 100, and when we get a 92, it's like, well, if you got a 92 and you brought others along with you, got the job done, but you did what was important, and motivated others to come along with you versus trying to be perfect all the time. And it sounds like this was part of another story that I recall of a sponsor or mentor you had in your career that also reminded you of this, that you have to step out behind the screen to be a leader, because just doing the work is not enough. Can you share about that mentor?
Yeah. So this was a point in my career where, as you said, I just had my head down. I was, I was getting good performance reviews. So I thought, okay, I'll just keep doing this. And at some point, someone will recognize me and say, okay, hey, Julie, you've done a great job. So here's your next promotion. But basically, what he said to me, and it was not easy to hear, was that if I wanted to progress in the company, I would have to demonstrate that I could, what he called, lead from the front.
Mm,
And he said, all the great work that I'm doing, but supporting from behind the scenes, that's fine for the level that I was at. But at the next level, to reach vice president level, you have to be able to lead from the front, he said. And so part of that is about being able to motivate people, but part of that is demonstrating to leadership that when you have a point of view, you can advocate for it, you can build a business case around it, and you can bring people together to execute against that idea versus just being the one
mhm,
behind the scenes. And so that was another one of those turning points for me where I had to make a conscious choice. Because
mhm,
again, as I said, I'm an introvert. So
mhm,
being that one out in front is not a comfortable
mhm,
place for me to be. So I had to figure out how to pull on those levers so that when I needed to be out front, I could do so and do
mhm,
so well, but then find my moments to go behind the scenes so that I
mhm.
can recover and refresh from my own energy perspective. And that took a lot of time and a lot of trial and error.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is exactly what I think people want to hear because there are so many introverts that listen. A lot of Asian Americans are a lot of, or they think they're introverted, and they always hear this like, okay, well, it's funny. It's like, oh, if I had Jeremy Lin on this podcast, it's not that interesting because no one's going to have that physical ability or be 6'3" or be able to play like that, right? But when they see you, they're like, oh yeah, I couldn't be that. She's able to speak on stage in front of tens of thousands of people and command a boardroom
No,
and it's like, well,
not
but
always.
yeah. And so I think a lot of folks are like, I can't make that leap. What was it that inside you that made you do these uncomfortable things? Or how did you, like, what are baby steps that you recommend to people? Because they always ask me, I can't do that. I'm just not, that's just not me. I don't want to give a presentation. I'm scared. Like, what was it that got you out in front?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what helped me at that point, but then I'll give you what I do now, which I think is a different perspective
Mm-hmm.
that can be more powerful for some people
Mm-hmm.
depending on where they are. So at that point, I just said to myself, I just have to keep trying because part of it was I hated not being good at something,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, well, just like everything else, you have to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I started with something very simple. So I used to never ask questions in a meeting, a senior
Mm-hmm.
leaders type of meeting or the executive team meeting when I was there to present on a topic or be part of a discussion on a particular topic. I would wait until someone asked me a question and then I would address it. And so I made a promise to myself that I would ask a question at every single meeting,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not a
Yeah.
huge thing,
Yeah.
but just a single question,
Yeah.
right? And so for most meetings, right, you knew the agenda, so I could prepare and like, okay, this is a question. These,
Mm-hmm.
this is,
Mm-hmm.
and then slowly over time, it's like because I waited, someone else would ask the question, and then
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have the question I wanted to
Yeah.
ask. I said, okay, I'm going to be the first
First.
person
Mm-hmm.
to ask a question. And so it is these little baby steps
Yeah.
that help. And then after you do it a few times, you get better. And then you don't have to always have a pre-prepared question.
Yeah.
You're able to, come up with them on
Yeah.
the spot. And, they weren't always the best question, but part of it is just doing it. And
And
then
that's
you get,
okay. Yeah. It's okay. It
yeah,
wasn't the
and
best
then
question.
exactly. And then you get better at it. And it was the same with presenting. Although this is one where, my manager really helped because what he said to me was, I'm going to make you present as many times as I possibly can. And there would be these random like town halls or whatnot that he was supposed to do something at. And he'd be like, oh, Julie, you're going to present. So again, that practice. And let me tell you, those first, whole bunches of presentations, they sucked.
Yeah.
They
Sure.
were
Of
really
course. It's
bad.
okay. Yeah. You made mistakes. It's
But
okay.
you keep doing and you keep learning and you figure out what works for you. And then over time you get better and better at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm like, did he want to help you or did he just not want to do the work to present? Like, he's like,
Maybe a
I don't want to prepare for this.
combination.
A little bit. Yeah. It worked out all right. No, but I mean, I tell people, even the asking of the questions, like, people will start to acknowledge and recognize you when you're a kind of a voice that they consistently hear and they think, oh, that's a really good question. And they'll want to talk to you after and they get to know you. But if you never put yourself out there, no one's going to know your name. You're not going to get promoted. You're not going to be acknowledged. Your whole career relies on people actually recognizing and seeing you. And if you're never
No,
seen, like, you can't expect any more. When you complain about not getting a raise or promoted, it's like, do they even know who you are? So it is important to just even the smallest steps of asking a question where everyone's like she always asks good questions in that meeting. Who is that person? Just wondering.
no.
You've been at essentially the same, I don't want to say the same company, but iterations of the same company for 25 years now, right? Baxter and they spit out and then that company gets bought and another company gets bought. So, but throughout, you've had to move a lot. You've had to travel
Yeah.
around the world. And so it's exactly what you wanted. You've moved up the ranks steadily. And what would you say is kind of the secret sauce of getting promoted? Is it saying yes to whatever's asked of you, or and then you were willing to move to places, or are there other things that people who feel like they've hit a ceiling in their careers, they've been a director for 5 years or 10 years, like what is that you did? Do you think that differently that allowed you to kind of move up the ranks and be trusted with new positions in different countries and kind of slowly move up that ladder without hitting that ceiling?
Yeah. So I would say it's a combination of different things. First and foremost, it's important to have sponsors or advocates within the company. And they need to be, you don't have to go to the CEO, but they need to be individuals who are senior enough that they have visibility into the different types of roles and potential roles that are being discussed, or who might be moving on, et
Mm,
cetera, et cetera. Because if you don't have someone like that who can speak on your behalf, or more importantly, to suggest you
mhm,
as a potential candidate,
mhm,
it is exponentially harder.
mhm, mhm.
And unfortunately, that's the way the world
Yeah,
works. And so, to your earlier comment, if people don't know your name,
yeah,
it's hard for you to be considered
yeah.
for roles. And so, if you can build a relationship with someone who can be an advocate or sponsor for you, that is really important. So,
Mhm,
for me, I was fortunate enough to have two individuals at a critical point in my career, and one was the head of the division, and the other was the head of the international organization. And basically, the gentleman who was the head of the division was my direct manager. And he
mhm,
said, "Look, you need to run a country." So when you look at a pharmaceutical company, typically the roles that lead to executive team level positions on the commercial side, okay, on the commercial side, typically at some point, those individuals were general managers of a country,
mhm,
right? You run the P&L, you're responsible for the business in a country, and you go from smaller country to bigger country, et cetera. So he said, "Look, you've gotten all this great experience, but you haven't run a country. So you need to do that. So let's keep our eye out for
mhm,
that type of a role." And the gentleman who was running international, he was also a sponsor. And he said, "Okay, I agree. I will keep an eye out." And so once an opportunity came up to move into a general manager position, the two of them made it happen.
mm,
Right. So that was one where, again, that advocate sponsor role was
mhm,
critical
mhm,
in making that move to fill out that part of my
mhm,
experience set.
mhm,
I would say all of the other moves, it's a combination of, not necessarily paying attention to what the title is,
mhm,
but what's the experience that
mhm,
it's going to
mhm,
give me, so that I have that broad
mhm,
leadership base
mhm,
to build on. And so it's not always easy to do, because again, we get fixated on, hey, it's a ladder and I need to
mhm,
get a promotion and then
mhm,
another promotion, then another
mhm,
promotion. That doesn't always give you the best experience to build out your full capability set. So
mhm,
that's the second thing. And then the third thing is looking at who your manager is going to be. Earlier in your career, there's so much you have to learn. Even if you have a bad manager, you're probably going to still
yeah,
learn.
yeah,
But as you progress in your career, who your manager is makes a much bigger difference
mhm,
in the type of experience that
mhm,
you will have, because you know that what you end up doing doesn't always reflect the job description that's
mhm,
written
mhm,
on the piece of paper. And something might sound fantastic,
yeah,
but if you have a bad manager versus another role that on paper maybe
that's
doesn't
good.
look as attractive, but it's a fantastic manager,
Mhm,
I would go for that fantastic manager.
great advice.
So it was always a combination of those different things that played into the career moves that I had. And then, of course, the things that I couldn't control, the company spinouts and acquisitions that
Yeah.
forced different changes to happen.
Yeah, it's funny because I think a lot of people think of their career as like a chutes and ladders where you're like a one singular path around and you just keep going up and progressing forward. When it's really like chess, like you're just moving in different places in different positions, but there's not necessarily like a linear, a clear direction of how to get there. But you get there, you win somehow through different moves. But more importantly, if you have sponsors, without them, Like you need those people to see the moves ahead to tell you, oh, that spot's open, or someone's
Yep.
about to leave because they're retiring soon, or that person has got another job, so you should take it.
Yep.
But I don't think people understand like how important that is. Without that insight, like you have no clue. You're basically waiting till a jobs rec shows up, but by then it's already gone. The job you wanted is gone. So you have to be two steps ahead, like in chess, knowing that that job's going to be open so you can be suggested for it. But I don't think people think that far ahead or that how important that is. And it's really everything if you don't have those kind of sponsors to tell you.
And that's why it's important to build relationships
Hmm.
within a company and not just focus on, okay, this is the work that I was assigned to do, and I'm going to deliver, the best work against that assignment. That's not sufficient.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not sufficient.
I always wonder, like, so my friend Debbie Sue, she's the CEO of Open Table. She told me when she was in probably in college that she knew she wanted to be a CEO.
Mm.
Did you know like all this talking to your sponsors, was there a goal in mind? I mean, obviously you don't say it out loud that I want to be CEO of Takeda one day or something, but was that the goal? Because something has to motivate you to make these moves, or was it no? That sounds interesting. Just being curious, and it's like no, I want to learn and I want to take on that role or find something interesting to keep. And it just happened that well, after a while, you do enough of that. Hey, you'd make a really good CEO. Like, what was it? Chicken or egg?
So, unlike your friend Debbie, I did not have this vision of being CEO of a company one day. So, so for me, I guess for most of my career, it was about how can I have a broader impact on people,
Hmm.
right? Going all the way back to that visual of filled church
Hmm.
for my mother. How can I have more impact on people?
Hmm.
So that was the driving force. Wanting to be able to help more people
Hmm.
was a bigger motivation, and it's still a motivation today.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I had those conversations with those two sponsors that I mentioned before that I thought, okay, well, maybe I can make it to the executive team. So that's kind of where it started. That the two of them pushing me to think bigger than I
Hmm.
was thinking,
Hmm.
and so that was I guess for a period of my career that was what I thought. It's like okay, I can make it to
Hmm.
the executive team, and it wasn't until um, I had the conversation with previous CEO of Takeda that well, actually, during that time period when the announcement was made that Takeda was acquiring Shire,
Hmm.
I got a lot of calls from recruiters at the
Hmm.
time saying, "Oh, hey, there's this biotech or that biotech. Would you consider being CEO of a biotech?"
Hmm.
That was the first, okay, maybe I could be
Hmm.
CEO.
Hmm.
But then I decided to stay with Takeda. And then when the previous CEO had conversations with me about being in his succession plan, that I started to think, okay, well, maybe I can be CEO of a large company. So it wasn't from the get go,
Yeah.
it built slowly over time.
Well, now maybe others kind of younger will have the aspiration because they actually see someone that looks like them in that position. But before, it's hard to see if you've never, I mean, it's hard to imagine if you've never seen it before. So now they know it's possible. You made it possible for a lot of others. And I think during the Q&A at JPM, you gave this advice. There's a lot of folks who are Asian American who are in R&D or in finance departments and whatnot. And you mentioned you can't be a CEO unless you run a business unit. Like you said, you have to do more than just staying within your kind of pocket. Can you elaborate more on that?
Well, I guess it depends on what sort of company you want to be CEO of.
Hmm.
When you look at many biotechs, absolutely, you can get there from the science side.
Hmm.
Many founders are scientists, and they can be CEOs of biotechs. There's
Hmm.
many examples of
Yeah, we
that.
know some. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not that you shouldn't follow that path, but if you want to go to a larger
Mm.
company, it's not as common.
Mhm.
right? So you do have examples. So Vas Narasimhan, who's the CEO of Novartis, came from the R&D side,
Mhm.
but there are
Few.
fewer
Yeah.
examples.
Yeah.
Most well, you can do it from there are CFOs that become CEOs of large companies, but typically they come more from the business. This is that
Managing a
challenge
P&L.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, that I was telling you earlier about doctor, lawyer, engineer.
Mhm.
Those are the typical careers that stereotypically most Asians pursue, which doesn't necessarily lead you into the commercial side of the
Yeah.
house.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
so, there's this bias then when you come in from a more technical field of expertise. It's not as easy sometimes to cross over into more general commercial or business leadership.
Yeah. And so now that you're the CEO, I think a lot of people see your journey and they think, "Oh, wow, you've worked around the world. You moved from LA to, I mean, Deerfield's not as exotic, but to Deerfield, Illinois, to London and then Zurich, and now you're going to Japan, between Japan and Boston." But it didn't come without cost because there's your personal life that is involved as well, and you have children. And I
Yes.
think your son had a challenging time adjusting when he had to move to London and
Yep.
get settled into school, and then a offer came your way to move again.
Yep.
Can you talk about that side that's not kind of thought about as much? I mean, I think again, being a mom, you have a lot more pressure on you, I think, than a lot of dads do. And nobody asks men, "Oh, would you have to give up for all this?" But they should, because dads do too. But I think for
Yes.
you, you had to give up a lot of opportunities because of your family. Can you talk more about kind of the costs of doing all this? Because it sounds all glamorous, but there's another side of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, part of it is I always said to myself, if the job wasn't meaningful enough, then I needed to walk away.
Hmm.
Because to your point, you are making sacrifices. You are compromising. For most of my roles, I was traveling constantly. And so I was not always there for the first this or the first that. I wasn't showing up at school all the
Hmm.
time with cookies or
Hmm.
anything like that, right? The schools knew our nanny better than they knew me. So the jobs always had to be meaningful enough.
Hmm.
And so that is one thing that I would say to any young parent. If your job isn't meaningful enough, then you need to find another job
Hmm.
because otherwise it's not worth the sacrifice and compromise that you're making on the personal side. So
Hmm.
that's point one. You should stay true to that. The second thing is that, when the kids are older, involve them in the conversation. They're much more adaptable, resilient, smart than you
Hmm.
think that they are. So, when we made the move to London, they were too young. They were kindergarten and second grade. They didn't really understand what was happening. But when we moved to Switzerland, they were old enough. And so I made them part of the process.
Hmm.
I did my pre-work. For example, I went and looked at, I don't know, 15 plus homes, narrowed it down to the 3 or 4 that I could live with, but
Hmm.
then, the kids went with my husband and they got to pick
Hmm.
where we lived,
Hmm.
right? So they were part of the
Hmm.
process and it made it better
Yeah,
for
they're
them.
invested in it too. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And then the third piece that I would say, and this goes back to when they were younger, but it holds through to any age, you have to figure out those things that are special between you and each child if you have more than one. And when you figure that out, don't compromise,
Mhm,
right? Because the last thing that you want to do is become that parent that your child cannot rely on.
mhm,
And so for me, it was bedtime routine from when they were very young was my thing.
mhm, mhm,
So I would leave the office at 5 so I could be there when they were much younger. So I could
mhm,
be there for dinner and do the bedtime, but then I would get back on the computer
Mhm.
after they had gone to sleep. When I was traveling, I would call and wake up at 2 in the morning if I had to do the bedtime routine with them and then try to go back to sleep. It was a consistent thing. It wasn't
Mm.
huge, but it was consistent and it
Mhm.
was our thing
Mhm.
and it was special to us.
Mhm.
You know, even to this day, even though they're 20 and 18,
Mhm.
you know, every day I send and they send back a little bedtime routine via text.
Mm.
So it's and like I said, it's one silly example, but it's that consistency and that commitment that builds a special relationship and bond. And you need to have that when you're not there all the time,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
there's that strong connection.
Yeah. It's your way of showing up for them, and you're always showing up for them that way. That's awesome. And so now, I guess, now that you've kind of worked around the world, and now you've worked in Europe, and you work in Asia, and you've been around the US, what are your learnings from kind of navigating all these different cultures that you've learned from Asian, European, American cultures? What are some things that you've learned from kind of working in all these different types of cultures and being kind of a
Yeah.
chameleon?
There's this phrase called cultural fluency, and it's something that you need to develop if you're going to work in a global environment because any culture is culture centric,
Hmm.
particularly the US
Hmm.
culture. And so if you're going to be culturally fluent, you have to understand different perspectives and not make assumptions.
Mm.
The biggest challenge is that people make assumptions, and on top of that, there are already built in unconscious bias. But on top of that, there are conscious assumptions that people make
Hmm.
that are the source of so many misunderstandings and miscommunications and challenges that arise that really don't need to be there. And when
Mm.
you take that away, you're able to see things at face value.
Hmm.
And then you can see the different perspectives
Hmm.
and help to bring alignment or bring a common focus when you have people who are coming from different perspectives into the room.
Yep, super insightful, especially for those who are working abroad. So let's just step out of the work environment into kind of your nonprofit and charity work. You got to know the amazing Mayor Michelle Wu, during her run for office for Boston, and now she's done an amazing job. And she appointed you to the board of trustees of the Boston Public Library. You also sit on the board of Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, leading the international committee. I often talk about why it's so important for Asian Americans to serve on these boards, to get more involved, not just civically, but in nonprofit charities, boards, and whatnot, because that's where like the most powerful, important people are in those, and we need to be in those rooms. But I don't see as many folks feeling like that's that important. I don't know if it's, again, heads down, stick to your work, and make money for your
Yeah.
family, and build your own wealth and little kingdom, and don't talk, keep your head down. But that is a lot of reasons why I feel like we don't have any power in this country, is because we're not involved in places that, the powerful people are. And sometimes, I don't know how diverse the Boston Public Library Board is. Maybe with Michelle now, it's much more diverse. But I think being on those boards with important people in that city and society there is really important. Can you talk more about your motivation to serve on these boards?
I would say it goes back to wanting to make an impact and a positive impact in the lives of people. So beyond the four walls of the company that I'm at, you can only do that if you engage in external organizations. And so I think whether it's, your school board or, your church community or other organizations, nonprofits or whatnot, take that step and engage and figure out how to share your voice, which is going to be built on all the unique experiences that you have had, but it is also a representation that then gives others an example of, oh, okay, well, yeah, look, Dave's doing that.
Hmm.
Maybe I should do that too, or maybe I can
Hmm.
do that too.
Hmm.
Because to your point, engaging in the broader community is the only way to have a voice
Hmm.
that can provide change,
Mhm.
provide insight into another perspective, if if you don't provide that, well, who's going to provide
Mhm.
that?
Mhm.
And there's always this assumption that, oh, well, someone else can do that. But at some point, that someone else needs to be you.
Yep. Yep. Agreed. I guess I kind of almost in closing, but the one question I have is that you are, and I'm sure it's not a label that's stamped on your head. You're the first Asian American or Korean American CEO of a large but there is a lot of kind of weighing pressure. I remember when Jeremy was like the first this or that in basketball. It's there's this pressure, but you don't think about it. You're not consciously thinking about it every day. But it's hard not to see the difference between you and what the stereotypical aggressive white male CEO of American or Western companies, these companies are. How, when you are leading, when you're known for leading with inclusion and empathy and the way that you're known to lead, do you ever feel pressure to be more like the aggressive, more stereotypical, white
No,
male CEO?
no,
Good, that's awesome.
right? Because look, throughout my entire career, I was, the only woman in the room or the only Asian in a room. So I've spent 30 years being the only this
Mhm.
or the only that.
Mhm.
And so as I said earlier in my career, yes, I felt that pressure
Mhm.
and I gave into that pressure. And I tried to fit into that mold of what was expected, what success looked like. But you can't perform at your best when you're trying to conform to a mold that isn't you.
Mhm.
And so that's why I say now, no, I don't feel that pressure because I've learned over time that the only way I can do the best for the company and do the best in the role is by being me.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, someone else might lead in a different way, and you know, that's neither here nor there. But I can only lead in the way that I know how to do, and that I've learned over all of the different experiences, and that's why I'm here.
Mhm.
So staying true to that is the only way that I'm going to be able to continue to do well.
And what a perfect segue into the K-pop Demon Hunters question about you becoming Rumi and being fully yourself. But yeah, you are a K-pop Demon Hunters fan, and it sounds like this is probably one of the reasons why Rumi finding herself and living in two worlds and not fully being herself. And when she did, she found power in that and was able to seal the honeymoon and everything else. But it's almost like a symbolic movie of this journey for you, going back to your parents and you're figuring out what you wanted to do and all the things you learned. But I guess I answered the question for you. But like, you love that movie.
Yeah.
What was it about that when you're watching it?
So I guess I didn't, of course, yes, part of it resonated because of my where I was, but I think in general, Um, I think it's so powerful when people can fully accept who they are. And I've just seen that over and over
Mm,
again over the course of my career, and people that I work with and that I maybe mentor and don't work with, that when they reach that point of fully accepting who they are, that's always when I see them take
mm,
off.
mhm,
That's always when I see them do so much more than they thought that they
mhm,
could. And that's why I
mhm,
think it resonates so well with so many people
mhm,
around the world. It's that acceptance of all of your flaws, all of your beauty, all of that combined
mhm,
is what makes you you. And having everyone else around who accepts you, that's when you can truly be at your best.
mm. Wow. Well, truly, thank you so much for all of these inspiring stories and the insights. I think for many, you will be the roomie that they look up to and realize that they, I mean, we laugh about it, but that's why I had this podcast. I have high school kids listening to this. I have CEOs listening to this. And I think sometimes just a reminder that being your true self is what's going to get you the furthest. And when you have to pretend to be someone you're not, it's really hard to get anywhere. And so thank you for being that reminder for us. Congratulations on finally taking that CEO job last month, and we can't wait to see what you do next. But again, thank you for inspiring so many people. You may not even know what you're just doing your job, but you are inspiration to many, many people.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Dave. It was really fun chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hyphen Nation. Please subscribe to my Substack at www.davelou.com and follow us on Instagram at the Hyphen Nation and LinkedIn at Hyphen Nation.